On Friday of last week, there was an accident on a demolition site up in Paisley in Scotland. Man was injured very seriously. He was rushed to hospital, and sadly, 24 hours later, he passed away. The guy was called Derek Russell, 36 years old, and a father of 6 children. And given that he's just 36 or was just 36, you'd have to assume that most of his children are probably quite young. So there is a wife. His wife is now, I guess, trying to figure out how she goes on without her husband. Children are trying to figure out how they get on without their father. There'll be a community up in Ardrossan, which is where he was from, coming to terms with his passing. Obviously, the colleagues at work, he worked for a company called Kasky Demolition. They will be coming to terms with it as well. Just such a huge and tragic and sad impact. Having done this job for almost 40 years now, I've reported on more site fatalities than I care to remember. Far too many. One would be too many, but I've done much more than that, and it doesn't get any easier. My concern now, of course, is the fact that this potentially goes into a black hole, and that is unfortunately the way these things have a nasty habit of playing out here in the UK. In about 6 weeks' time, it will be the 10th anniversary of a disaster at the Didcot A power station, in which 4 men were tragically killed. 10 years on, and there has been no findings presented, no prosecutions, no court cases. It's ongoing. I think there is a hope that come the 10th anniversary, there will be some movement in that department, but there's no guarantees. We've seen lots of these anniversaries go before, and nothing has happened. And there is every likelihood that will happen again for the 10th anniversary. So while I would love to offer comfort to Derek Russell's family, particularly his wife at this time, my fear is that they will not be seeing any real findings, any real justice, any real closure much before 2030, and possibly beyond that. It's a broken system. It really is a broken system. The Health and Safety Executive here in the UK, if you're watching in the US, that's the equivalent of your OSHA. Here in the UK, it is understaffed, underfunded, which means that any investigations do take an inordinate amount of time. And that's bad enough from a family perspective, for the wife and children of those that were killed at Didcot, Derek Russell, who was killed up in Scotland. It's bad enough for them, but there is a wider implication, and that's the bit that I tend to focus on, because my primary concern, my primary audience, if you like, is those in the demolition industry. There have been power stations taken down like Didcot around the world in the past 10 years, and every single one of those has been done with probably the nagging doubt in the back of someone's head that there might have been something within the Didcot disaster that might have changed the way that they go about the demolition on their power station. But again, we're still waiting for the findings of those investigations. So people have been going to work, not entirely sure that the methods that they'd been chosen, or that they'd chosen and that they were now implementing, were as safe as they could possibly be. Now, the incident in which Derek Russell has been tragically killed are markedly different. As far as I understand, it was a house site, so much less complex, not a major boiler house at a power station, much less complex. So you would like to think that the findings would be very easy to ascertain and to understand, and for that court case to be speeded up, but I'm really not hopeful. And even if it is turned around in a year, 2 years, we've still got people, men and women, tens of thousands here in the UK and hundreds of thousands beyond the UK, will be going to work. They could have learned a lesson. There might be something within the tragic incident that has taken the life of Derek Russell. There could be something within that we as an industry could take, spread around, circulate it, disseminate it to the wider industry to say, here is what went wrong on this job that resulted in Derek Russell not returning home to his family. Be careful. Do not do this. Do not don't do this or make sure that this does not happen. There is a learning opportunity, but that learning opportunity is currently under lock and key and is likely to remain under lock and key for quite some time, which makes me wonder, which is, I guess, is the real reason I wanted to go live today. Is there, I wonder, scope for some form of independent inquiry, not by the health and safety executive, not by the procurator fiscal, I think they call it up in Scotland, not by the local police, not by the local authority, but independently by the demolition industry itself. We have some very good demolition consultants who advise on how to safely demolish and dismantle buildings. They are very qualified, highly qualified people who understand the makeup of buildings and the engineering that goes into them. Could we not reverse engineer that and take some of those consultants and task them with the job of ascertaining precisely what caused the accident that killed the four men that died at Didcot, that killed the accident that killed Derek Russell, and all the other accidents. Now, I do realise there will be those that come back and say that is likely to prejudice a court case. Should there be a court case, it will prejudice any sort of prosecution investigation. And I see that. I do see that. But what is more important, a successful prosecution against a demolition company or safeguarding the lives of thousands, tens of thousands, or potentially hundreds of thousands of demolition workers on a daily basis? To my mind, the key idea here is to make sure that demolition men, demolition women go to work and come home safely. And if we could find some way of instigating an independent report, and bearing in mind the independent report would be done by and for the demolition industry. If as an industry we cannot be trusted to keep those findings under wraps and away from the prying eyes of the health and safety executive or any sort of prosecutor, what we're trying to ascertain here is purely the lessons that will benefit potentially the demolition industry. So as a supposedly mature, supposedly professional industry, surely there would be some way for us to go away, perform an independent inquiry and present our findings purely to the demolition industry. Now, that might be through a body like the Institute of Demolition Engineers, highly regarded and has a very good president at the moment. I'm sure they could find some way of making sure that the findings of that independent inquiry could be contained within the Institute of Demolition Engineers and not go beyond. And we could, by doing that, we could actually safeguard the life and livelihoods of demolition men, women, demolition companies here in the UK and beyond. And I realise it's a lot to ask, but what is the alternative? I'm so endlessly frustrated by the inordinate amount of time it takes for the UK to process any form of investigation. And to give you an example, as I say, on the 23rd of February 2016, a part of the boiler house came down at the Didcot power station, Didcot A power station, and four men were killed. We're almost in 5 weeks' time or thereabouts, it will be the 10th anniversary. We have no findings from that. There was a similar incident in America about 2 years later in Ohio. That was investigated, prosecuted, case closed within 18 months. Why can the Americans do something in 18 months that we have taken 10 years to do? And it all comes back to where our priorities lie. Are our priorities to ensure that the health and safety executive, which basically is self-funding these days, that they get a nice big healthy fine as a result of their investigation into Didcot, or should their priority be giving some sort of justice, some sort of closure to the families of the four men that were killed at Didcot, and now to the families of Derek Russell, who was killed in Scotland on, injuries on Friday and died on Saturday? To my mind, There is no argument there. If there is a case to answer, if there has been negligence, if somebody has been put in danger deliberately, if health and safety regulations have been overlooked or sidestepped, and as a result somebody's been injured or somebody's been killed, then then throw the book at the company responsible. Absolutely, 100%. But long before that ever needs to happen, the thoughts are surely, or should surely, be with the families of the people that have been injured, maimed, or in many instances killed. And this is a universal problem. I put on Substack the other day. I put up a post the other day on Substack called "Normalizing the Abnormal," in which I talk about the fact that demolition and construction fatalities are now so common that we have a league table to monitor how many people we've killed each year. In 2024 to 2025, the combined demolition and construction industry killed 35 people. According to one of the reports I've read, all of those were as a result of falls from height, which is a whole other argument. If people are dying with such regularity, and let's be honest, we're talking about, what are we talking about? 3 per month are, on average, are dying from falling from height. Surely, as a mature professional industry, we should have by now devised some way of building and demolishing buildings without putting men and women in danger at height. But as it stands today, 2026, we're 12 days in. In fact, when we were 10 days in, brand new year, new hopes, new aspirations. We've already lost one of our number. And it's a tragedy. And then that tragedy, I think, will be compounded. It'll be compounded by the fact that this will now go into a black hole. There will be an outpouring of grief, particularly with the family of Derek Russell. There'll be a degree of support offered from within the industry, from the guy's employer and from the wider demolition community. And there may well be a GoFundMe. I haven't seen that as yet, but there may well be a GoFundMe to help support the family who've just lost probably their primary breadwinner. There will be a funeral at some point. Excuse me. And then there will be a lot of protracted nothing at all. There will be an investigation, and that investigation will take place behind closed doors, and it will take as long as it takes, which is equally troublesome to me. If you win a demolition contract, you win it on the basis that you will complete the works within a set schedule. 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months, a year. You are required to abide by a deadline. And in many instances, particularly when it comes to demolishing structures over like motorways or railways, there is a hefty financial penalty. If you run an hour late, it will cost you an absolute fortune. So as an industry, we are held to a schedule. But when one of our numbers die, there is no cap. The health and safety executive and the police force, the procurator up in Scotland, the local authority, have no end time in mind. There is no cap. It's not this investigation must be completed in 12 months, 18 months, 2 years. It will take as long as it takes. Think about that from Derek Russell's family point of view. I don't know how. I know he's got 6 children. He was 36. So even if he got married at 20, let's say he's got a couple of young children. There is every possibility that some of his children may well reach adulthood before they find out what actually happened to their dad on Friday, the 9th of January. I don't know how as an industry we can countenance that. I don't know how we can continue to break bread, I guess, with the health and safety executive. The health and safety executive is our police force for safety. And as an industry, we do need to be in communication with them. We do need to understand what their plans are, what particular hazards they're targeting at any particular point. But should we be pally with the health and safety executive, which is knowingly, not entirely their own fault, but knowingly withholding from us and from the families of the deceased demolition workers findings that could potentially save more lives? I find it very hard. I bump into health and safety executive representatives from time to time, and I find it very hard to bite my tongue, knowing full well that they are sat on information that could potentially save a life or multiple lives. Probably won't win any friends saying that, but that's the truth. In the case of Didcot, the health and safety executive don't have primacy. Primacy there is with the Thames Valley Police, but they similarly have been sat on the evidence, accumulated evidence for 10 years. And one of the things that I find most painful about Didcot is one of the daughters, or a daughter of one of the guys that was killed, has since got married. She was very close to her dad. Her dad didn't make it home. He died at Didcot. So instead of being walked down the aisle by her father, as I say, to whom she was very close, she wasn't. That's the truth. That's what a demolition death actually means. You imagine the family home now up in Scotland, Derek Russell's family home. His wife probably grief-stricken. How will I make ends meet? How will I pay the bills? How will I keep a roof over our head? The older of his children trying to come to terms with the fact that their father isn't there. The younger children probably not fully understanding precisely why dad didn't make it home over the weekend. And that is something that will hang over them for life, basically. I've been quite fortunate. I turned 61 in a few weeks' time. I lost both my parents nearly 4 years ago. And as I say, I'm in my 60s, but I still feel that the hole that they left, the void that they left. Imagine that when you're a young child. And I know what I was like with my dad. My dad wasn't just the person that brought me into the world. He was my idol, my role model, pretty much my everything. And there's 6 children now that don't have that. They've been robbed of that, which is bad enough in itself. But that is now, as I say, post grief or post initial grief, post funeral, is likely to go into a deep, dark black hole while an investigation takes place behind closed doors. I love the demolition industry. I really do. It's despite the fact I'm an interloper. I'm just a journalist. The industry has largely made me an honorary member. I don't think there was ever a meeting to agree that. They've allowed me to be a part of it, largely been welcomed into it. I don't always see eye to eye with everyone, but been largely welcomed into it. It's given me a good living. It's kept a roof over my head. And some of the best people I've ever met are demolition contractors, demolition men and women. But we could do better. We need to do better. I said at the turn of the year that one of my hopes was that we would not have a fatality until March. I realise that sounds like a strange wish, but given the fact that we generally, and it is generally, suffer 30 to 40 fatalities every single year within the demolition and construction industry, I actually figured if we could hang on till March, that's probably 4 or 5, maybe 6 or 7 less than we might normally experience. We barely made it out the first week before we lost the first of our number. And going back to that league table of death that I was talking about, we've already chalked a mark on the board. 10 days into January, 10 days into 2026, 10 days into a new year. We've already got a black mark against our name. And there's an awful lot of year. 350 odd days of the year to go. And we've already got our first black mark.